The sun dipped below the hills, casting golden light across the kingdom. Inside a grand but crumbling manor, Cinderella scrubbed the cold stone floors. Her hands were raw, her back ached, but she didn't stop. Stepmother would check soon, and if she found a single speck of dust, there would be no supper again. Her stepsisters, Rosalind and Vivian, lounged by the fire, draped in silk gowns. They whispered and giggled, glancing at her. Rosaline smirked as she dipped her spoon into a silver bowl of honeyed figs. "Did you hear, the Vivian? The prince is hosting a grand ball. Every noble lady is invited." A Vivian gasped, her emerald eyes gleaming. "A ball. That means a royal engagement must be near." She turned to Cinderella with a cruel smile. "Oh, how tragic. You'll be here, scrubbing floors, while we dance in golden halls." Cinderella felt a pang in her chest but kept her head down. Once long ago, she had dreamed of such things. Music, laughter, a handsome prince. But dreams were for those who had freedom, and she had none. A gust of wind rattled the windows. The candles flickered. Stepmother entered, her dark gown swishing against the floor. "Cinderella," she said, her voice smooth but sharp. "The cellar needs cleaning." Now, Cinderella bit her lip. "But Ike—" Stepmother's glare froze the words on her tongue. "Did I ask for an argument?" Rosaline chuckled. "Careful, mother. If she keeps talking back, she might think she's one of us." Vivian laughed, tossing a grape into the air and catching it with her mouth. "As if." Cinderella bowed her head and hurried toward the cellar door. The stairs creaked beneath her feet as she descended into the dim, musty space. Dusk clung to the air. Shadows stretched across the walls. As she grabbed a broom, something shifted in the darkness. She gasped, stepping back. A whisper floated through the air. Cinderella, her heart pounded. "Who's there?" Silence. Then, a soft glow appeared, a tiny light hovering near the old wine barrels. She inched closer, breath held. The glow pulsed, revealing a delicate figure, a woman draped in silver mist, with eyes like the stars. Cinderella's lips parted. "Are you a fairy?" The woman tilted her head, studying her. "Do you not remember me?" Cinderella frowned. "Remember?" The fairy's voice was sad. "A promise was made long ago." "A promise you have forgotten." Cinderella's breath caught. Somewhere, deep in the corners of her mind, something stirred. A memory, buried beneath years of sorrow. The fairy reached out. "It is time to remember, Ba." Before Cinderella could move, the air shimmered. The cellar melted away, and she was standing somewhere else. Somewhere bright, filled with laughter and warmth. A little girl, no older than 5, twirled in the sunlit garden. She had golden curls and a soft laugh. And beside her stood a woman, her mother. Cinderella gasped. "Mother." The memory played like a dream. The little girl giggled as her mother pressed a gentle kiss to her forehead. "One day, my darling, when you feel lost, when the world seems cruel, remember, magic will always find you." The scene faded. The cellar returned. The fairy's gaze was filled with sorrow. "Do you understand now?" Cinderella's hands trembled. "My mother, she knew." The fairy nodded. "She left you a gift. But you forgot. You stopped believing." Cinderella's eyes burned with unshed tears. How could she have forgotten? How could she have lost something so precious? The fairy stepped closer. "The time has come. Will you reclaim what was meant for you?" Cinderella hesitated. If stepmother found out, if her stepsisters saw. A sharp knock code from above. "Cinderella, hurry up, you lazy girl." Her breath hitched. She looked at the fairy, at the soft glow surrounding her, and for the first time in years, she made a choice. "I want to remember." The fairy smiled. "Then let the magic begin." A rush of wind swirled through the cellar. Cinderella felt it wrap around her, lifting her feet from the ground. Her skin tingled, her heart pounded. And just as the magic surged, the cellar door burst open. Stepmother's voice was like a blade. "What is going on in here?" Cinderella turned, her heart leaping into her throat. The fairy vanished in an instant. The glow faded. Stepmother's eyes narrowed as she stepped into the room. "Who were you talking to?" Cinderella's mouth went dry. "No one." Stepmother's lips pressed into a thin line. "Liar." Rosalind and Vivian peered down from the top of the stairs, their faces full of curiosity. Stepmother grabbed Cinderella's arm, her grip like iron. "If I find out you've been sneaking around, meddling in things that do not belong to you?" Her nails dug into Cinderella's skin. "You will regret it, Bot." Fear clutched at Cinderella's chest. Stepmother released her with a shove. "No, finish your work. The ball is in 2 days, and you will not be going anywhere." She swept out of the cellar, the heavy door slamming shut behind her. Cinderella stood frozen, her heart hammering. The magic had been real, the fairy had been real, and now Stepmother was suspicious. As the candlelight flickered, Cinderella knew one thing. The next 2 days would change everything. The night was colder than usual, and the wind howled through the trees outside. Cinderella lay on her thin mattress, staring at the ceiling, her mind racing. The memory of her mother's voice echoed in her heart. "Magic will always find you." But the magic had disappeared just as quickly as it had arrived. Had it been real? Or had she imagined it? No, she couldn't have. She had seen the fairy with her own eyes, felt the warmth of the glow surrounding her. But now, Stepmother was watching her closely. One wrong move, and she would lose whatever chance she had at uncovering the truth. She turned onto her side, listening to the sounds of the house. Her stepsisters. Laughter drifted from down the hall. They were likely picking out their gowns for the ball, draping themselves in silks and jewels while she lay on a bed of straw. Her chest ached, but she swallowed down the pain. Dreams were dangerous. Hope was dangerous. And yet she couldn't shake the feeling that something was coming. Something that would change everything. The next morning, the house was buzzing with excitement. Rosalind twirled before the mirror, admiring the way the fabric of her deep blue gown shimmered in the light. "I think the prince will notice me first," she said with a smirk. "After all, blue brings out my eyes." Vivian rolled her eyes. "Please, he'll be too distracted by me to even look at you." She smoothed down the golden fabric of her dress. "Besides, Mother says I have the perfect posture of a queen." Cinderella kept her head down as she swept the floor, trying to stay out of sight. But it didn't matter. Stepmother's sharp eyes found her immediately. "Don't dawdle, Cinderella," she said smoothly. "There's still much to do." She gestured toward the pile of fabric and ribbons on the table. "You will be altering the gowns today, and make sure they fit perfectly. If they do not—" She let the threat hang in the air, but Cinderella knew what it meant. No supper. More work. A night locked in the cellar. She nodded silently and got to work. Her fingers worked tirelessly, stitching and adjusting, making sure every seam was perfect. As she sewed, her mind wandered back to the fairy, to the memory of her mother. A promise had been made. But what did it mean? What had she forgotten? A soft breeze brushed against her cheek. Even though the windows were closed, she stilled. Was it the magic again? She glanced around, but nothing seemed different. And yet, something in the air felt alive. She shook the thought away. It didn't matter. Nothing could change her fate. Even if magic was real, even if her mother had left her something special, she would never be able to escape this life. Not while Stepmother held her captive. Hours passed, and finally, the dresses were complete. Rosalind and Vivian inspected them with smug satisfaction. Not bad, Rosaline said, flipping her hair over her shoulder. I suppose you're useful for something after all. Cinderella said nothing as she carefully folded the remaining scraps of fabric. Stepmother approached, her gaze sweeping over the work. Acceptable, she said coolly. Now, Cinderella, go fetch more firewood. We wouldn't want our guests tomorrow to be cold, would we? Cinderella hesitated. But the firewood is in the woods. It was nearly dark outside, and the idea of wandering into the forest at night made her stomach twist. Stepmother's eyes narrowed. Did I ask for your opinion? Cinderella swallowed hard and quickly shook her head. No, stepmother. She turned and hurried outside before she could argue further. The cold bit at her skin as she stepped into the forest. The trees loomed overhead, their bare branches twisting like skeletal fingers against the sky. She shivered, it rubbing her arms as she made her way toward the woodpile. The wind whispered through the trees, sending chills down her spine. But then, something strange happened. The air shifted, thick with energy. The same sensation she had felt in the cellar. Her heart pounded. Was the fairy here? A soft glow appeared between the trees. Cinderella's breath caught. She stepped forward, her hands trembling. Is it you? She whispered. The glow pulsed, then slowly a figure emerged. But it wasn't the fairy. It was a man. A tall man, cloaked in deep green, his face hidden in shadow. Cinderella's pulse raced. Who are you? The man tilted his head slightly, as if studying her. Then, in a deep, calm voice, he said, I have been waiting for you. Her breath hitched. Waiting for me. The man took a step closer, and the glow surrounding him brightened just enough for her to see his eyes, piercing, golden like the sun. The magic has begun, he said. And you are at the center of it. Cinderella felt the world tilt. Her mind screamed that this was impossible, that she should run. But something in his voice held her still. Something about him felt familiar. What do you mean? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. The man lifted a hand, and suddenly the wind stopped. The trees stilled. The entire forest seemed to hold its breath. You are more than you know, Cinderella, he said. And if you wish to claim what is yours, you must be willing to take the first step. Cinderella swallowed. The first step toward what? The man's eyes burned with something intense, something ancient. Freedom. The word struck her like lightning. Freedom. Something she had never dared to believe was possible. Her heart pounded in her chest. Could she trust him? Could she trust the magic? She opened her mouth to speak, but before she could, a distant voice called her name. Cinderella. It was stepmother. Panic shot through her veins. She turned back toward the house. If she didn't return soon, stepmother would be furious. But when she looked back at the man, he was already fading into the shadows. His voice, however, remained in the air, a whisper that wrapped around her like a promise. The choice is yours. Cinderella ran back toward the house, her heart hammering. The choice was hers. But what if she chose wrong? The night was restless, her mind unable to find peace. Cinderella lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, the man's words echoing in her heart. The choice is yours. What did he mean? Why did he look at her as if he knew something she didn't? The glow, the stillness in the air, it wasn't a trick of the light. It was real. The magic was real. But what was she supposed to do with it? She couldn't just walk away. Stepmother would never let her. And yet, the thought of freedom burned inside her like a flame refusing to be smothered. Morning arrived too soon, and with it, a new wave of demands. Cinderella was up before dawn, scrubbing the floors until her fingers ached. The house was in chaos. The ball was that very evening, and Rosalind and Vivian were drowning in last-minute preparations. Make sure my gown is steamed properly, Rosalind ordered, and polish my shoes until I can see my reflection. Vivian smirked. Don't forget mine, and I want my hairpins arranged exactly as I told you. A stepmother's gaze lingered on Cinderella as she poured tea. There was something different in the way she watched her today, something calculating. You seem distracted, child, she said, her voice smooth but sharp. What is on your mind? Cinderella forced a smile. Nothing, stepmother. Just making sure everything is perfect. Stepmother leaned forward, her lips curving into a slow smile. Good, because you wouldn't want me to think you were planning something foolish. Ah, Cinderella's stomach twisted. Did she know? No, she couldn't. And yet she felt exposed, as if her thoughts had been read. She lowered her gaze and focused on the task at hand, ignoring the knot forming in her chest. As the afternoon sun dipped lower, the house grew quiet. Stepmother and her daughters were getting dressed, their laughter echoing down the halls. Cinderella stood in the empty kitchen, staring at her reflection in the dull silver tray. Was this truly her life? Was this all she would ever be? A sudden gust of wind made her shiver. She turned. The man was there, standing in the doorway, his golden eyes glowing in the dim light. You hesitate, he said. Why? Cinderella's breath caught. Because I don't know what to believe. I don't know if I can trust you. The man stepped closer, and she could see him more clearly now. He was not just a stranger. He was familiar. You already know the truth, he said softly. You have known it all along. Her pulse raced. She wanted to run to demand answers, but before she could, another voice filled the air. A voice she had not heard in years. My sweet girl. Cinderella froze. The room blurred as a warm, golden light filled the space. And then, standing beside the man, was her mother. Her knees nearly gave out. Mothered. The woman's face was gentle, her eyes filled with love. Yes, my darling, I have waited so long to see you. Tears welled in Cinderella's eyes. But how? You're gone. Her mother smiled, a sadness in her expression. Not completely. My love for you has never left, and neither has the magic. She reached out, her hand brushing Cinderella's cheek. You are more than this life of servitude. You have always been meant for more. The man spoke again, his voice steady. She left you something. A gift. It is time you claim it. Cinderella's heart pounded. What gift? Her mother's gaze softened. Go to the garden. The truth is waiting for you. A loud knock at the door shattered the moment. Cinderella turned sharply. Stepmother's voice rang through the house. Cinderella, where are you? When she spun back around, the glow was gone. Her mother, the man, vanished. But the warmth remained, wrapping around her like an embrace. She had to go to the garden. Her hands trembled as she pushed open the back door, slipping into the cold night. The garden was wild, overgrown, untouched for years. But she moved with certainty, drawn towards something unseen. And then, her breath caught. A small chest lay beneath the gnarled roots of an old tree. Her hands shook as she reached for it, brushing away the dirt. The moment she touched it, a golden light pulsed from within. The truth was waiting. She lifted the lid, and everything changed. The light burst from the chest, wrapping around Cinderella like a golden thread, weaving through her skin, her bones, her very soul. She gasped, clutching the sides of the chest as a wave of warmth flooded her. Visions flashed before her eyes, memories she had never seen, whispers of a past she had never known. She saw her mother, standing beneath the very tree where she now knelt. She was younger, her hair flowing like silk, her hands glowing with the same golden light. It must be hidden, her mother whispered to someone unseen. She must find it when the time is right. And then, her father. Cinderella's breath hitched. He stood beside her mother, his strong hands gripping hers. "She will be in danger if they know," he said. "We must protect her." Cinderella's heart pounded. What were they talking about? Who was in danger? The vision shifted. She saw stepmother, younger but just as cruel, standing over her, her eyes cold and calculating. She must never know. Stepmother muttered to herself, watching as a much younger Cinderella swept the floors. She must never find out what she is. The vision shattered. Cinderella gasped as she was thrown back into the present, the golden light fading into her skin. She clutched her chest, her heartbeat erratic. "What I am," she whispered. The wind rustled through the trees, whispering like unseen voices. And then she knew. The magic. It wasn't just something she had discovered. It had always been inside her. She was born with it. A shadow moved at the edge of the garden. Cinderella's breath caught. Someone was watching. "You found it?" a voice said. She turned sharply. The man was back, standing just beyond the tree line. His golden eyes glowed in the darkness. "You knew," she accused, her voice trembling. "You knew all along." He nodded. "Yes. And now so do you." Cinderella clenched her fists. "What does it mean? Why did my parents hide this from me?" "Because they were protecting you," he said. "Your stepmother is not just cruel. She is dangerous. She always knew what you were. That's why she kept you hidden, why she treated you like a servant. She wanted you weak, helpless." A chill ran down Cinderella's spine. The pieces were falling into place, but the puzzle was far from complete. "But why? What does she want from me?" The man hesitated. "Your power. She has spent years stealing magic, collecting it like a dragon hoards gold. And you are the greatest source of it she has ever found." Cinderella staggered back. "No, that can't be." The man stepped forward. "Why do you think she kept you from the ball? Why do you think she never let you leave? She was waiting for the moment your magic would awaken. And now that it has," his eyes darkened, "she will come for you." A cold dread settled over Cinderella. The house. She had to get back to the house. If stepmother knew what had happened, if she had seen the light. She turned on her heel, sprinting toward the door. But just as she reached for the handle, it flew open. Stepmother stood there, her lips curled into a knowing smile. "Going somewhere, dear?" Cinderella froze. The air between them was thick with something unseen, something dark. Stepmother stepped forward, the smile never reaching her eyes. "You thought you could hide it from me," she whispered. "You thought I wouldn't know." Cinderella's pulse roared in her ears. "I don't know what you're talking about," she lied. Stepmother laughed softly, shaking her head. "Oh, my sweet, foolish girl, I have known since the day I first laid eyes on you. You are not ordinary. You never have been. But now—" Her eyes flickered with something sinister. "No, you are powerful. And power is meant to be taken." But before Cinderella could move, before she could even breathe, stepmother raised her hand. Darkness exploded around her. The last thing she heard was her own scream. Darkness wrapped around Cinderella like a heavy cloak, pulling her down, down into an abyss where no light could reach. She gasped, struggling to move, but her limbs felt weighted, her breath shallow. The shadows coiled tighter, whispering, hissing, pressing against her skin like invisible chains. A cold voice drifted through the darkness. "You thought you could run from me?" Stepmother's voice, smooth and sharp like a knife. "You thought you could escape what you were meant to be." Cinderella fought to open her eyes. When she did, she found herself in a place that was neither her home nor the garden. It was endless, swirling with mist and shadow, as if reality itself had unraveled. She was trapped in stepmother's magic. "You should thank me." Stepmother's voice came from nowhere and everywhere at once. I kept you safe. I kept you hidden. And this is how you repay me. Cinderella forced herself to stand. Her body ached, but she planted her feet firmly. You never kept me safe, she said, her voice shaking but strong. You kept me small. You kept me weak. A chuckle echoed through the void. And yet here you are, still my prisoner. Cinderella's heart pounded. No, she refused to be a prisoner. Not anymore. The magic inside her pulsed, burning like fire in her veins. She focused on that warmth, on the golden light she had felt before, the power that had always been hers. She closed her eyes and reached for it. A spark flickered in the darkness. The mist around her trembled. Stepmother's voice sharpened. What are you doing? Cinderella didn't answer. She let the magic rise, let it surge through her like a storm breaking free. The darkness shuddered, cracking like fragile glass. Stepmother appeared before her, her eyes narrowing. You think you can fight me? Cinderella lifted her chin. I know I can. A stepmother's hands twisted in the air, summoning dark tendrils of shadow. They lashed out like serpents, curling toward Cinderella with deadly speed. But Cinderella was faster. She raised her hands, and the golden light burst forth. It met the darkness head on, colliding with a thunderous crack. The shadows shrieked, recoiling, twisting, fading. Stepmother staggered back. Impossible. Cinderella stepped forward. You never wanted me strong. But you forgot something. She clenched her fists, feeling the power surge. I was never weak. With a final, blinding burst of light, the shadows shattered. The void collapsed around her, dissolving like mist in the morning sun. And then she was free. She gasped, stumbling forward, blinking against the sudden brightness. She was back in the garden, back beneath the tree, where it all began. The chest lay at her feet, its golden glow fading. A hand caught her arm. Cinderella! She turned, finding the man with golden eyes staring at her. Relief flooded his face. I thought she had taken you? Cinderella looked down at her hands, still tingling with magic. She almost did. He tightened his grip. She's not gone. She will come back. And next time, she will be stronger. Cinderella met his gaze, her resolve hardening. Then so will Ida. A wind swept through the garden, carrying away the last traces of shadow. The battle was far from over. But for the first time in her life, Cinderella was ready. Cinderella stood in the garden, her heart still racing, her hands trembling with the remnants of magic. The golden-eyed man watched her carefully, his expression unreadable. The air around them was thick with the echoes of the battle, with the fading whispers of stepmother's magic, but Cinderella knew it wasn't over. Not yet. Not until she faced her completely. Not until she was free forever. We have to go, he said, his voice urgent. She'll return stronger. You need to be ready. Cinderella turned to him, her pulse steadying. No more running. No more hiding. Her voice was firm, unwavering. I end this tonight. A flicker of something crossed his face. Admiration, worry, maybe even hope. But he nodded. Then we go to her. But the castle loomed ahead, dark and waiting. The windows flickered with eerie light, the walls seeming to pulse as if alive. Stepmother's presence was everywhere, wrapping the air in cold tendrils of magic. The doors creaked open before Cinderella even touched them, as if inviting her inside. She stepped forward, and the golden-eyed man followed. The hall stretched endlessly before them, shifting and twisting, the floor rippling like water. It wasn't real. None of it was. It was her magic trying to pull Cinderella into another trap, another illusion. But Cinderella had learned. She had seen through the lies. She would not be fooled again. Her voice cut through the air. No more tricks. The illusion shattered. The walls trembled, the floor solidifying beneath her feet. And there, at the far end of the hall, stood stepmother. Her dress was black as the void, her hands curled into claws of shadow. "You don't belong here." Her voice slithered like ice against Cinderella's skin. "You were nothing. You were nothing." Cinderella took a step forward, her magic humming beneath her skin, golden and warm. "I was nothing because you made me nothing." Another step. "You took everything from me." Another. "But I am not nothing." Stepmother's lips curled into a sneer. "You think you can win." The shadows coiled around her, thick and suffocating, filling the room like a living storm. "You are still the weak, frightened girl I raised." "No," Cinderella said softly. "I'm not." She raised her hands, and her magic answered. Light erupted from her fingertips, golden and fierce, pushing against the darkness. The shadows fought back, writhing, lashing. But Cinderella didn't falter. Stepmother screamed, her voice twisting with fury as the light swallowed her magic, as it pushed through every dark corner, unraveling every spell, every curse, every lie. The castle trembled, the walls cracked, the air shifted, and then silence. When Cinderella opened her eyes, the darkness was gone. The castle stood still and quiet, the air light and free. Stepmother was nowhere to be seen. The golden-eyed man stepped closer, his gaze searching hers. "It's over." Cinderella exhaled, her shoulders loosening, the weight lifting from her chest. It was over. She turned toward the open doors. Stepping out into the cool night air, into the world she had been kept from for so long. The sky stretched wide above her, endless and full of possibilities. She had won. She was free. And for the first time, Cinderella smiled.